Let me begin by extending special thanks to Barbara Kingsolver for inviting her friend Ann Patchett to visit for a weekend, and then to include this event as part of that visit. Barbara has been a good friend of the Washington County Public Library since she moved to this area several years ago. She's allowed the library to sponsor at least 2 events when she had new novels published. Barbara's most recent Barbara's most recent novel, Flight Behavior, has been selected as the library's adult summer read for this coming summer. So lots of folks will be reading a Barbara Kingsolver novel this summer. Also, Ann Patchett, even though she probably thinks she is no stranger to the Washington County Public Library patrons. 2 of her novels, Bel Canto and State of Wonder, have been summer read selections in recent years. So hundreds of Washington County folks have read both of those books. Here in Washington County, we've been blessed with Barbara and her family's passion for the locavore, the Eat Local movement, which has resulted in the Harvest Table restaurant in Meadowview. And a lot of you probably know that Ann has been a leader in the national movement to support independent bookstores. She and a friend have opened Parnassus Books in Nashville to support that effort. I suspect that you wouldn't be here tonight if you weren't familiar with the works of Ann Patchett and Barbara Kingsolver, so I'm not going to give you a litany of their achievements. Both are writers of serious literary fiction and nonfiction, and both are considered among the preeminent living writers in the world these days. Both have received the prestigious Orange Prize for Fiction, a British literary prize given to the novel judged the best in the world, written in English by a woman. So that's extraordinary. And some of you know that Barbara's new book, Flight Behavior, is on the short list for the current Orange Prize that will be given this summer sometime or in the fall. Tonight's event is unique, I think. It will begin with a dialogue between the 2 of them, starting with the issue of the importance of literary friendships, but I hope extending to similarities of themes that they share in their fiction. Both writers are concerned about a variety of environmental and political issues, as we know, so we will probably hear about those concerns.
I don't want people to think I'm a crazy woman walking around with my handbag, but I have a terrible cold and I can't be without my Kleenex. So that's my disclaimer. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Ann.
Oh, you have a lavalier.
I do.
Okay.
Do you want it?
No. You are so sweet.
Oh,
you would give me the lavalier off your blouse.
I thought that would be easier to talk to.
No, this is good.
Can you hear us both?
Yes.
Raise your hand.
We can be louder.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Raise your hand if you can.
The great thing is I can't hear her because I have a terrible cold. I'm deaf as a post.
Do we have an ASL interpreter?
Well, actually, I lip read pretty well, so I'm going to be staring at you.
What, I could write you notes.
You could.
I could pass notes. You can see why when Ben thanked me for inviting my friend Ann to come visit. He didn't need to thank me for that.
Well, what was really cool is when he said I was staying for the weekend, because I thought I was just staying tonight.
No, we're not letting you go.
So I've already scoped out the extra house in the back. Okay, so we should talk about friendship. I like that idea rather than talking thematically about work. Mm-hmm. I don't actually remember any of the books that I wrote.
Did we write books?
Did we? Have you ever read one of your books?
Never. No, in fact, I can't imagine it, because if I went back to, the Bean Trees or Pigs in Heaven and read it, I would want to change. Red Pen. I would want to change everything, wouldn't you?
I can't even imagine. On the list of things that I couldn't do, reading Patron Saint of Liars, even when someone asks me to sign Patron Saint of Liars, I sort of do it. I don't want to touch it. It's not that I think it's bad. I don't think it's anything. I don't know what's in there. I don't know anything about it. I can remember once, this was maybe 10 years ago, somebody introducing me at a reading, and she got up and she read this long passage from Patron Saint of Liars. Did I tell you this story?
No.
And it was just a descriptive passage, of like trees or something. And it was very pretty. And I had no idea who was saying these words, how they fit into the plot. I had never heard it before. And I thought, oh, that's nice, but I thought, I can't ever. My phobia about my books is enormous.
Well, mainly they're done.
They're dead. It's like, it would be like looking at a box of your own hair.
Fingernails.
Right. Hair and fingernails and teeth from childhood.
Now, the teeth could be interesting.
Actually, I have a childhood tooth, and I know where it is.
Okay.
And I run across it maybe once every 5 years.
And does it give you the willies, or are you?
There's a little bit of a pleasure in it.
Okay.
Seeing.
Right. So.
Did you think it was going to be like this? Okay, so we're not going to talk about our old books because we haven't read them.
Because they're like boxes of
and
hair.
boxes of hair. But tell me about literary friendship.
Well, I have lots of them, don't you?
I do, and I'm interested. And yours. Who are some of yours?
Well, I have two categories of literary friends, or other writer friends, also other artist friends. And there's a considerable overlap, but there are the colleague friends who you need when you're a writer because, well, everybody has friends at work, right? I mean, I've seen The Office. I know how this works. We work alone. I work in a room by myself. I'm surrounded by Charles Dickens and Virginia Woolf and people like that, but they don't talk. They're just up there on the shelf behind me, looking down on me, disapproving mostly. So. Even though I like being alone, I think that's probably a principal ingredient or prerequisite for being a writer is you need to like being by yourself a lot. But once in a while I want to get up and go to the water cooler. I want to find out, what have you read lately that really turned you on? Or what did you do when you read this book that everybody loved but you didn't? Or what do you do when you feel like the book that you're writing is the worst thing you've ever written? That's a real good reason to go to the water cooler. So, but in my house there is no water cooler, but I have friends who do the same work and who sort of understand the life I'm living, and I really like their collegiality. So, instead of the water cooler, I will email them or write letters. I do have writer friends who still write letters.
Yeah, I do too.
Fewer and fewer, but a few. Mostly my writer friends write letters on email, like pages and pages, and I do that too. I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah.
So that's one category. And the other very important category of writer friends for me are, I would say, mentors, because this is a profession no one really is prepared for. Right? I mean, a few people grow up wanting to be novelists, but most of them don't, frankly, end up being novelists. And many of us who end up being novelists didn't expect it. I mean, I didn't study writing. I didn't go to an MFA program. I didn't take writing classes. And here I am.
I did all of those things.
I know. So I'll be interested to hear if you have this same sort of need for mentorship, but mainly no one told me. I mean, it's one thing, I feel like I learned about writing and still learn about writing from reading. I mean, so Charles Dickens and Virginia Woolf and those people up on the shelves, those were my teachers. But they didn't tell me anything about what do you do when you have to predict your You know, you have no idea how many people are going to read your book this quarter or next quarter. So, and sort of how to build your career. What's the best way to pace yourself? What do you do when your expectations are exceeded? What do you do when you feel derailed? So I've been helped almost magically at certain times when I really needed it by writers who were farther along that path than me. And the first one, I would say, was Amy Tan, who, she's not a lot, well, she's a little older than me, but her career took this sort of meteoric rise with her first novel. And so she had to become a famous writer really quickly. So she had been doing that quite a while when we met. And I was saying something about how I was flummoxed by the mail that I was getting. I didn't even have time to open it all, let alone, you know, read and answer it. And she said, "Barbara, you don't have to do that." And I said, "Really?" And she told me how to have an assistant. I hadn't imagined that it was possible. And I wasn't even ready. And she said, and her assistant was named, oh gosh, I'll get this wrong, but it was something like Armand or something. And she said, and he picks out my clothes for me. And I thought, I'm not ready for that assistant. But the one that goes to the mailbox every day, that one I could have. So she, you know, and at other times when I felt like I was sort of crashing and burning, like I didn't know how to handle the, you know, have a book tour without having a nervous breakdown, or these friends who have done it before me have sort of reached down and, you know, given me very helpful advice about just how to live this life, which is not what any of us expected, right?
Boy,
Okay.
I didn't have that. This is really interesting. We're having a conversation in front of you that we've been having behind your back for a long time. And I just remembered Alan Gerganis, who is the closest thing to a mentor I've had, and he's not been a mentor. He was my teacher in college. But I can remember when I sold my first book, and this is just coming back to me, that Alan said, answer every piece of mail you get, and do it on a postcard and never put your return address on it. Which is what I've been doing all these years. But I didn't have Amy Tan. You know, I didn't have people, I have been that person for a lot of people, but I didn't have that person in my life along the way to say, this is what you do. And now I'm feeling bad about it. Who else?
Well, so some of my mentors have not been writers, but have been other famous artists of some other kind. I find that there's a category of friend I have. I mean, I have a lot of categories of friends. I mean, many friends who are not writers or artists. But because the writing life, or the life of an artist, has some peculiar dimensions to it. The main one being, I would say, that it's a very private act, and it's a very private work, and I think most of us who become artists are introverts and very private people.
And then we do this.
Yeah, they're just like, the way I described it when my first novel was published, this is how I described it to my sister. I said, okay, it's like you've been singing in the shower, you know, for like 2 hours, and then suddenly they throw back the shower curtain and you're naked and there's 100 people in your bathroom.
Did you see that last Woody Allen movie?
No, did that happen?
Yeah. Do you know which one I'm talking about? Yes. Yeah, where the guy sings brilliantly in the shower, and so they take him on an opera tour and they push the shower out on stage.
That was me. That was me. My first novel. That's how I felt. So, one of my very dear friends is Annie Griffiths, who's a National Geographic photographer, and very famous. And she, you know, does photographs presidents and goes to Antarctica and things like that. But she also has a very grounded, sensible life, and her children are her greatest priority. And so we get on the phone about every other Sunday and talk for 2 hours about how to sort of pull these very different kinds of life into one human being. So you have people that you do that with.
Well, you know, but the interest, I do, absolutely. And I have friends who are much more famous than I am, but I didn't have them when I was coming up, not in a way where they gave me good advice. One of my really close friends is Renee Fleming. And what I love about, I know, isn't that impressive? Isn't that, I love dropping those opera names. And one of the things that I love about my friendship with Renee, and with a couple of other girlfriends that I have who are really, really famous, you know, I just think it's sort of like I'm in a garage band and they're the Rolling Stones. And so she gives me all sorts of perspective. You know, when we're talking about our problems and I'm thinking, wow, when I go out and give a reading, I don't have to change gowns in the middle of the reading. I don't stop after 15 minutes and then go and put another gown on and come out again. Or she then puts on a third gown at the end. So everywhere she goes, she sings in 2 gowns a night, and then she meets the audience after in a third gown. And she keeps a record of where she's worn each dress in every city. And when she wears a dress on television, she has to retire it. And when we have those conversations, I'm like, oh no, I don't have any problems at all.
But you know what else? She has assistants.
You know what she does, but this is interesting. She travels alone.
Does she?
So she takes all of those gowns by herself. And when you go to her hotel room, they're just flopped over every available surface.
She should hire Armand. He's probably done with it.
But I do love hearing about other people's problems. Another great friend of mine is Elizabeth Gilbert. And she's got a set of problems like you can't even imagine. I sent her the galley for my new book. I had 3 copies of my new galley. And I sent it to 3 of my very best writing friends. I sent it to Jane Hamilton and to Donna Tartt and to Liz Gilbert. And I heard from Donna and I heard from Jane and I didn't hear from Liz. And weeks went by and I didn't hear anything. And then I sent Liz something else. And she wrote me a long letter about this funny thing. I sent her a really ugly dress that I had worn to diffuse another author. That's a very funny story. And I sent her the dress, and she wrote me a long letter about how funny she thought the ugly dress was. And I called her and I was like, did you just not get the galley, or did you hate it so much you can't talk to me about it? And she said it had accidentally gone into her galley hamper. She has this giant hamper where all the books people send her, she puts them in a hamper.
I have a galley hamper.
Damn, where have I lived? My husband walks in every night from the front steps and he's like, it might be chocolates? It might be a galley? And then I open it. Did you just put it in the hamper?
We were in your living room and the doorbell rang and you said, it's the 3 o'clock galley.
That's right.
And I thought to myself, but did not say, I'm really glad at my house I don't get the 3 o'clock galley. It goes to my wonderful assistant Judy in her office, and I never even have to know.
I'm gonna make such a play for Judy at the end of this evening.
Oh man!
I promise you the world.
But seriously, you need to put those things in a box. Close the lid.
I went to Catholic school for 12 years, and I am really still compelled to open my mail and to answer email. But I'm going to say something great about taxes.
Oh, okay.
You said the thing about quarterly taxes, because this is a very sweet story. When I was young, I used to date David Foster Wallace. And he had a manila envelope taped to the wall in his bedroom. And he would put his receipts in the envelope. And he said, you put all of your receipts into an envelope, and then every quarter you tally them up, and you tally up everything you've earned, and you divide it by 3. Anyway, he gave me this whole math system for working it out, and I still use it to this day. That was the most
not only the most practical piece of advice, it might have been the only practical piece of advice I received, other than the lousy advice Alan Gerganis gave me about writing to every single person who wrote forever.
Well, I would say it's time to move forward and give all those receipts to your assistant.
It does, the rule of three, though, it works very well.
It does, that's true.
Now, one of the things that I worry about in my life with literary friendships is that I don't have any in town. You know, when I was young, I lived near my friends, my writer friends. We went out together all the time. We were physically together, and I live in Nashville, and my writer friends don't live there. And so much of my life, the most important relationships in my life now, are conducted over the phone or by email or through letters. And that concerns me sometimes.
What concerns you about it?
Because it seems a little inhuman or cold.
I see what you mean, like once removed.
Right.
However, you do see them. I mean, you have play dates.
Here we
with your
are.
friends.
Here we are.
And you have this wonderful. I accused Anne of setting up a bookstore.
Oh.
And then having this beautiful house with this gorgeous guest room as a Venus flytrap for writers.
Actually, you know what? You're absolutely right. Since I've had the bookstore, that's really has changed. And I've only had the bookstore for a year and a half, but now everybody does come to visit. And I am having a lot of really interesting conversations about writing. And a lot
In your
of
own
them,
living room, right?
well, and a lot of them like this on stage, where there are writers who don't want to get up and give a reading, and they want me to come on stage and talk to them in front of people.
Oh, so you're used to this.
Oh yeah,
Not me.
but you're doing a really good
Am I
job.
doing okay?
You're doing a really, really good job.
Well, I have writer friends, poet friends in town, a poet friend I take long walks with and look at the wildflowers with. But you know what? Because we're both shy, and she's here, I think, my poet friend.
But too shy to raise your hand.
Yes, we're both really shy people, so mostly we email, even though we live 1 mile apart.
Are you shy? I know you're an introvert, and I'm an introvert.
But yes,
I'm not shy.
I read that book.
Did you guys read Quiet?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that was actually helpful to me to understand that introverted and shy are not the same thing. I used to be an introverted, shy person. I mean, I was off the charts. I'm still off the charts as an introvert. I think that doesn't change. That's like blue eyes. That's what you're born with. But I have learned not to be shy, just by pretending that I'm perfectly comfortable having a conversation with you while, you know, we're naked in the shower and there's all those people out there. You can, I mean, it comes with practice. And I think that it's a very ordinary thing to be afraid of public speaking and then to get over that. And that it doesn't, until I read that book and understood that shy and introverted are two different things, I thought that I was a fraud. I thought that because I'm an introvert, but I still, you know, parade myself around and go on book tours and talk to, you know, thousands of people, I thought I'm betraying my introvert nature. That I'm
That's really interesting.
fraudulent. I mean, I'm sort of making a joke of it, but I'm sort of serious about that. I thought there's something fake about this. But now I understand it's just a skill that you can learn. Even introverts can learn to be comfortable in front of people.
I think of it like acting.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think a lot of actors are shy. People will ask me, and actually I'll ask you this, do you read different parts from your books when you're out on a book tour, or do you read the same piece over and over again? If, say, you always have to read for 15 minutes, will you read the same 15? I mean, I've got different lengths.
Yeah, I have a 15, a 20, a 5, a 1, a 30.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And then I just ask, what do you want? 15? Okay, it's that one. And it does become a performance. It's very much like a Broadway show. I mean, not that I've done that, but when you're on a book tour, every night you're in a different place, but you're doing the same thing. You're in a hall with, you know, hundreds of people, and you're performing, and you're tired as can be because you've just done this and done this to death. but every night you just put on your show clothes and your show voice, and you go out there and you shine for 2 hours or whatever it is, and then you go back to your hotel room and you beat your head against the wall if you're me, or you just lie face down on the floor, exhausted. Yeah, or I call my husband and I say, oh, I want to go home. And then the next day, you get out and do it again. So it is and it's the show must go on, and it's a persona that you put on and do. And it used to be so much like acting, even that you could wear the same outfit every night.
Yeah.
So it was like you were getting in costume. Now they have YouTube, so everybody's seeing your red jacket.
It's like, Renee, you've got to retire the red jacket.
It's ruined our lives in a certain sense.
I actually have just never thought of it because I don't have a relationship to the internet.
I'm sorry, I just ruined your life then.
No,
No,
I
you keep wearing that dress. It's
I've
really
got
cute.
a block, and I absolutely believe that no one cares what I'm wearing or what I'm doing. Liz Gilbert told me that when she goes on tour, she has 4 outfits. She has an outfit for travel, an outfit for sleeping, an outfit for exercise, and an outfit for being on stage or on television. And she said the rest of her suitcase is deodorant. And no matter what, she just wears the same thing every single night.
Well, that's a good strategy.
It is a good strategy because what you just come to terms with is the fact that no one cares.
Until people say, I read all these tweets about your red shoes. And then what? Well, then you get self-conscious because you become the red shoes or something. But no, I'm still turning over the deodorant. Yeah. But see, that's mentorship. This is how
Yes.
I learned so much about tour wardrobes. I had one writing friend who said, buy everything silk and take a steamer, a plug-in steamer. Well, she was sort of ahead of her career. I mean, ahead of me in career. I couldn't afford to buy everything silk at that point, but I thought it was a good idea. I thought one day I would do that. I never did. I got everything like just, rayon instead. It works just as well.
No, it's true. I've learned a lot from Liz. But it's also just so interesting to see kind of where other people are in their life and in their thought process, and in more than anything where people are in their openness to meeting other people and to interacting with other people. And what I love about Renee is that she, bless her, man, she loves the people. She loves the people. And when she walks into a restaurant at 11 o'clock at night and everybody stands up and begins to applaud, you can just see it going through her like electricity. It means so much. And when everyone comes to the table and says, oh, when you sang Dove Sono, and she says, really? Really? I mean, and it matters. And the ability to absorb the love, which I think I lack sometimes. And I can see that on the spectrum. I have friends who have zero ability to absorb the love, and then friends who are completely open-hearted to the love. She will sign autographs in the rain until 2 o'clock in the morning for all the people standing outside on the sidewalk at the stage door at the Met. She will sign every single one with so much love and good-heartedness. And I don't think I have a writer friend who's that good.
No. No, she's not an introvert.
No, she's not an introvert. And
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So the simplest explanation, not that everything comes down to this, but the simplest explanation I've ever heard for introvert versus extroversion is that extroverts draw energy from
Yes.
being around people and being admired and being looked at and having conversation. Introverts expend energy being around people and therefore have to go home to their hotel rooms and lie face down on the floor.
Renee said to me once that if any opera singer was honest with you, he or she would admit that they did it for the applause 100%, which is a phenomenal thing to say.
And she does this really adorable little routine, you know, with her friends where, you know, they bring the curtain and she comes out and she goes, and she'll do it, you know, silently for like 10 minutes. It's so cute. And then someone said to me the other day, I can't remember who this was, someone said to me, if you could do it all over again and have the money and the comfort of life and whatever, but no one read your work. You had no identity as Barbara Kingsolver, but you'd written all of your books. Would you do it?
Okay, what was the question?
Yeah, if you were Jane Smith, writing as Barbara Kingsolver, and no one knew you were Barbara Kingsolver, no one had any idea who she was, and you got, Stephen didn't know, you got none of the glory, none of the love.
But I got to write the book.
But you got to write the books and you got the money.
Royalty checks, that would be the perfect match.
That's
As a matter of fact, and I have my family members here who can verify this, I say all the time, what was I thinking?
What was I thinking?
That first novel, had I known,
Why
I would have
wasn't I-
published as Jane Smith. Nobody would know.
Or just be J.D. Salinger. Be, you know.
I am J.D. Salinger.
No, you're not.
Yes,
That's the question. I mean, could
see,
you?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the difference between writers and performers, because technically writers are not supposed to be performers. We don't go into it for the performance. If we do, we usually fail as novelists, because you don't go into writing to be famous. That's a very bad idea for a spectrum of reasons, but mostly because the average income of a writer is something like, I don't know, $900 a year or something.
Right.
So
right.
It's a long shot.
We're throwing the curve
Right,
off.
we are. It's true. But the other reason is that you spend 99.5% of your time alone in that room. It's being a writer involves being very comfortable with solitude. It involves being an observer of humanity, not a participant, but an observer, an empathizer. I always think that when I go to the 5-year-old birthday parties, I can pick out, that's not the writer, you know, the one who's opening all the presents in the middle of the room and throwing all the wrapping paper and putting the, you know, bow on her head and dancing around. That's not the writer. The one who's sitting over there on the couch saying, wow, you can do that? What do I think about that? What makes her do that? That's the writer.
When I was a kid, I used to go downstairs in the days before Christmas and unwrap my Christmas presents one at a time, very slowly, take the tape off. I hate gifts. And the only way I could deal with a gift was to know what it was, and so I could sort of fix my face. I could work on the happy look. Gloves. Great. I couldn't do it spontaneously. It was so painful to have people looking at me while I opened a present that I had to know what was in. I didn't care what it was. I just had to care, and then I would wrap it up.
That's the writer.
That's the writer.
And so, isn't it odd that in modern times people know us as performers? I mean, number one, it's odd that we are compelled to come out of our little offices and go into the world and parade ourselves around. And also that people know us in that way. It's very strange. I never get over how strange it is. And yet, what we can learn from other artists, that when we watch Faye Flying, absorbing the love, and we see how people love to see her, it reminds me to be gracious about this, and mainly to be grateful, and to remember that what I'm doing by myself there in that little room upstairs is really only one piece of what art is. I'm doing my half of it, but the other done individually by every one of you. Reader, take this, take something completely new. And that's magical. So to be forced, perhaps shoved a little bit, to go out in the world and witness that and acknowledge it and be a part of it and say, thank you. Thank you for reading me. Thank you for reading Anne. Thank you for reading every book that you read. Thank you for believing in this amazing thing, literature, that will always be. That's really good for me. It's good for my soul. It's probably good for my my spiritual path to take that in as generously as I can. I'll never change my basic nature. It will never be easy for me. And it's not just introversion, but in my case also culture, because I grew up in this kind of a place where the most awful thing, I remember the aunts and the grannies saying about a woman was, she is parading herself around. And so when I go on tour, those words just follow me around. So, I didn't open my gifts early to arrange my face, but it's the same kind of thing. I am very uncomfortable with the notion that I deserve attention. And so, another thing I've learned from other shy writer friends, is to take that attention and deflect it and say, well, thank you for caring so much about literature, or just to use that for something else instead of just making it all about me.
Now, I do this other thing that I don't think that you do, which is I go out and give talks that not in any way related to book tour. I have like a whole life on the lecture circuit where I go into theaters in front of 1,000 people and I don't read, and I give a talk for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do that?
Only when forced.
Yeah. I do that a lot, and that has become an entirely different thing and a very interesting thing for me. And I have had moments where I have thought, actually, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Because it's like storytelling. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Spalding Gray. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I'm putting together something in front of a live audience, and based on response and where the laughs are and where you can see yourself connecting with people, shaping stories over time. And that's been incredibly interesting. And much, much more rewarding for me than going on book tour and giving a reading and answering the questions and signing the books. Mm-hmm. Because I actually feel like I'm making something, a little living piece of art in the reading.
It's performance art.
It's performance art.
And to some extent I do that as well on a book tour, just because I just get bored to tears reading the same thing after night. So increasingly I have, and it's interesting too that we, writers like ourselves, almost never set foot in bookstores anymore.
Unless we own them. I don't even like bookstores. I mean, that's the great joke from the opening one, is bookstores, I feel like a rabbit in a shooting gallery. I mean, when I'm in a bookstore, I'm like, where can I get out of the bookstore? Except now that I own one, and I do really, really like it.
Well, I actually missed the bookstores. Back in the day, you would go to a Tattered Cover or these Malaprop, Elliott Bay, these iconic stores. What was the one in Michigan? It's so sad now so many are closed, but you would go in the store and they would have a room that was, would hold 25 chairs or something, maybe 40 chairs, and then they would all fill up and you would give your reading. But now it's showbiz. So every night in a different city, the reading is sponsored by a bookstore, but they've rented the
Town Hall,
Herbst Theater or whatever. Right. So there are 2,000 people there. So it is, I know what you're talking about, and I've found lately, in recent years, that I do a short reading and then I just turn it over to let's talk.
Right.
And people ask questions, but I don't necessarily answer the questions, I'll sort of take it as, I mean, because
You're like a politician, you just get the answer
like,
question.
exactly like Sir not even in an evasive way.
Oh, no, I know.
I guess what I mean, because the question is usually, Miss Patchett, I really love everything you've ever written, and I just love, and you are the best, and you are the best thing, and then the question is, and so like,
do you write in the morning? Do you
yeah,
music in the
right,
morning?
yeah, exactly. So you answer that question generously by sort of taking it and moving it, and there's always a grain of something interesting in a question that you can sort of spin out into, well, why did I have the Poison Bible narrated by 4 different sisters? And more generally, what are the advantages of multiple narrators versus a single narrator? What are the pros and cons of the first person? I love to talk about process and craft and what I think about when I'm writing. So that's what I end up talking about in front of audiences. So it sounds like it's sort of similar to maybe to what you're doing in that you're creating, I don't know if you mostly talk about process or do you talk about ideas in the world? What are your talks like?
They vary, and I retire them over time. What I've been talking about lately is work, and how I'm really not interested in inspiration or talent or creativity, where those things just feel completely gone life. And in place of those things, I work. And somebody asked me a question in a class that I was sitting in on for a friend, and one of the graduate students said, what's the difference between how you write now and how you wrote when you were our age? And I said instantly, when I was in graduate school, I was 21, and I wrote the way I fell in love, which was, I fell as if thrown from a building. That nothing I could have done, if I was in love with someone, nothing I could have done could have put the brakes on. I could not have stopped falling. And when I wrote a story, it was the same thing. I stayed up for 3 nights, I drank, I smoked, I typed. I canceled all my appointments, I didn't wash my hair, I was crazed. And I said, and how I write now, and how I write, and how I am in love now is the same, which is it's work. And I've been with the same person for 20 years, and I know how to get up and write a novel, and I know I'll get stuck, and I know I'll get frustrated, and I know I'll get through it. But I'm not waiting for something like lightning to hit me anymore. So that is the germ of what I talk about now. But it changes.
Yeah, but you talk about how you write, and more generally about work and about creativity and those things. Yeah, no, I like to do that too. I like to start with particular and sort of draw it into universal. The way we write essays, frankly. We'll start with a personal anecdote and then draw it into some larger observation about life. And so, yeah, in some ways, talks before audiences are mini essays. When it's a good one. When it's a good one, when you've had a good night, you think, wow.
Yes, and
I did that. And when it's not a good night, you say, wow, well,
I have a book of essays coming out in November. And I feel like I'm going to have to retire all of my talking points when this book comes out, because so many of the essays have grown up out of things that I started talking about. And I'm going to have to come up with a whole new group of subjects.
Well, retiring your talking points makes the presumption that everyone will read the book, which is sort of like retiring your outfits, presuming everybody's seen your YouTube.
But you can't separate those people out in the theater.
You can say, okay, everybody who's read the book.
Yeah, right, go over here. I can remember not too long ago somebody coming up to me in the signing line and said, oh my gosh, I remember hearing a talk you gave about guns. And she was like, oh, this is a great hour-long talk about guns. I was like, oh my God, the gun talk. I haven't thought about the gun talk in like 12 years. I could bring the whole gun talk back. It's so gone. I could bring it back. So maybe that's it. You need, like the locusts. The talks could be like every 17 years I could rotate back. into these same tones.
They all know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's out. It's out. Well, should we?
I
Now
was
that,
just going to say.
now that we've completely intimidated you on this
Okay,
subject.
right, now that you know what amazing questions we ask one another, you'll think, how could I ever jump in?
Not to mention the fact that we don't really answer your questions.
No, I actually do.
Okay.
I actually do answer questions. Okay, no, I'm sorry. People often say to me, what's the question that stumped you? To which I say, I don't get stumped, you know. I write the books. I have no embarrassment threshold. I'm not troubled. I don't get troubled by questions. Do you get troubled by questions?
Here's the question that stumped me. Did you like the film they made from your book, The Beings of Egypt, Maine? True story.
Oh yeah, but I mean,
Real question.
everybody asks me or tells me how much they love Bird by Bird or The Dive from Clausen's Pier. God, I wouldn't want to be Ann Packer, who's always toting her heavy bag of Ann Patchett behind her. No, like a month ago, I was on stage and somebody, I wish I could get the wording exactly right, but the question was something along the lines of, do you write in order to praise God?
Wow.
And that was the face I made. So then I was like, so you're asking me if I believe in God. That's like the bedrock in this question.
So did that stump you?
That stumped me. That really stumped me because I was like, you know, Monday, Thursday, Saturday till like 11, I totally believe in God. And then the other days, not at all.
The trouble with that question is it really seems like there's going to be a wrong answer where that answer is.
Yeah.
So
So that's the one question. So I just want to get that out there. I have mixed feelings about it. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Other questions? Yes.
Since this is about literary friendship, I wanted to bring up Lucy Greeley.
Oh, yeah.
And I read her book a long time ago and was quite taken with it. And I teach it. And then your book came out sort of as a companion piece. I don't know what else to call it. And it doesn't strike me as that it came from this work. So I wanted to know, since it was written after your success in Bellingham, I believe, what motivated you to write Truth to Me, which I think is great.
Thank you. The question is what motivated me to write Truth and Beauty, which was a book about my friendship with the author Lucy Greeley, who died when we were both 39. And she had written Autobiography of a Face. Right after Lucy died, I wrote an essay about her and her death. And when I finished, I still had a lot more to say. And she had been dead probably 3 weeks, and I had written the essay, and I had the experience of people calling, and by people I mean my family, my very closest friends, the person I later married. And I would answer the phone and say hello, and they would say, oh, you sound a lot better today. And I would think, well, actually I thought something that I won't say in front of an audience at the Martha. But my response, no, actually I'm not better. If you heard a certain lightness in my voice, you were mistaken. And the idea that I could write this book as a way of sort of staying where I was in my grief, it was really a genius move on my part, because we don't allow people to stay with their grief. We want to rush it up, and are you better, and let's not mention it for her that her best friend has died. So by saying, oh, you know, now I'm working this, now I'm writing a book about it, everybody completely accepted that. And I stayed in bed. I think I wrote the book over 4 or 5 months. I wrote it in bed. By 3 weeks I was writing it. I had my computer and a cookie sheet. I had all of her letters and pictures and music, and I just stayed there. And everybody left me alone. And it was like sitting Shiva until you're ready to get up and go. And it was so beautiful, because I got to the point where I came all the way around through my grief and thought, you know, she did a really good job. She did a really good job with that weird little life she had. She had a million friends, and she was a great writer, and she was a great dancer, and she was a huge amount of fun, and she was so much joy and love and happiness, and she was ridiculously needy and whiny and pathetic and fabulous, and I kind of got it all down, and I got my perspective. So, yeah, it just kind of came out of this very heart-forward place. And of all my books that I will never read again, is this, maybe they catch a certain kind of fish, and then they roast that fish over a certain kind of burning wood. You know, maybe they eat a fly. You just kind of go down the list of all the weird things that could happen. Quinine, of course, being connected to malaria, bark, and then Carl, my husband, said, well, there should be something in the bark. It should be that the bark is broken and an insect lays the egg. It's got to be a combination of many things. So it would be a particular saliva, a particular insect egg, a particular bark. Just sort of sitting around and thinking about it. And that's the fun part. It's like working a crossword puzzle. My father is a police officer. And I'm not brave, but I think I would have loved sitting around and solving crimes. One of the things that I do that drives my husband crazy is if we go to the hardware store, I'm forever picking up a wrench and saying, do you think you could kill somebody with this wrench? Where would you, what's the smallest wrench here you could kill somebody with? Where would you have to hit them, and how hard would you have to do? Is it a downward thrust, or is it a side to side? And he's like, where did you come from? What happened to you when you were a child that you would ask such questions in a hardware store? But that's the way it's always been.
Research, and it's always puzzle solving. And I know now that our computers are, well, it used to be I would go to the library where, you know, with this long list of questions, you would do all this library research. And then I thought, oh, the internet has changed my life. It's so wonderful that you can find the answer to anything immediately. I mean, there are limits to that, of course, too. There's primary research you have to do. But a lot of those little questions, like what gauge shotgun would you use to, you know, to shoot that kind of person that far away? You can find that out in an instant. Here's the problem. Now that Google, you know, collects our cookies, what must they think of us? The kinds of questions that we're looking up, and then just start getting these ads for like bulletproof clothing and stuff. So yeah, it is a little dicey. Sometimes I have to admit, I'll go and look up something on my husband's computer.
I am such a Luddite. I don't do that. I just don't. I mean, I almost never use the internet. I am still in the hardware store asking Carl how to kill somebody.
Well, there are advantages to that if you have
There are.
a patient husband. Do you go to the library?
I do go to the library. I just rely on people.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really how I like to do my research. For example, when I was doing research for State of Wonder, I went to Bethesda. I went to the Bethesda Naval Hospital and found the guy who was the head of malarial research and spent a day with him. It actually never really occurred to me to look up malaria and just read about it.
Yeah.
I needed to go, because so much of it is visual. I needed to see the mosquitoes. I needed to interact and ask questions. Oh God, I can talk about mosquitoes all night. That's really
You want to hear about mosquitoes, don't you?
There'd be other
But
questions.
no, and I couldn't agree more that, and that's why I qualified that you know, the internet is helpful with sort of little things, but the big things, you have to go there. You have to be there. I think that's especially true of place. For when I wrote the Lacuna, I had a long list of places I needed to go. I needed to be in Frida Kahlo's house. I needed to climb to the top of the pyramids at Teotihuacan. I needed to go to the rainforest along the coast. I needed to go into the hut of a shaman who would, you know, like do a fertility rite. So I applied. I went and said I wanted to have a baby, so I could
shaman's hut for like 2 minutes. Like it could take you a week to get to the shaman's hut. You walk in and you're like, got it, okay, let's go. That's what's so weird.
Yeah.
I mean, we have gone so many strange places that we finally get to the middle of nowhere in Peru, and I'm like, okay. And Carl's like, really? We just went to Peru, and you were like, got it?
I'm not that fast. I want to stay.
I don't want to stay.
I take it. I guess, yeah.
In the shaman's hut, you want to stay?
I did. Actually, well,
I went to stay with the
want to stay
malaria.
till I got pregnant, no. But, no, I'm very curious, and I tend to take my team, my family, and this is something we've already begun talking about, not only literary friendships, but literary families, literary husbands, and parents, and the kinds of support we draw from our families. But I love to go, on a research trip if I can take my family, because Stephen is a great photographer and he takes a million photos. And flight behavior, for example, I had to go see those butterflies because I knew that throughout this book, and sure, if it's a 2-minute scene, you might not need more than 2 minutes in the shaman's hut, but I knew I was going to have to be creating scene after scene with those butterflies. So, and that was quite an adventure to get to the butterfly wintering grounds in Mexico, because we happened to go there, as luck would have it, the very week that the floods happened and washed over all the towns and all the access, and everyone thought the butterflies were dead, that the monarchs were dead. So it was an adventure, as I said. But anyhow, once we got there, Stephen took 1,000 photos. Is that possible? Easily. Lily, my daughter, who was 15 at the time, was my videographer. She took the video, because there's a lot that you can only capture in motion. So she took great videos, and then I took, probably literally 100 pages of notes, just note, and stayed as long as I could from sun up till sundown, went back and did it again, because I wanted everything. I wanted the smell of the place. And so that way, throughout the writing, and this was very early, and that depends too, we talked about that earlier today, they weren't here yet, but about how there's research you do early and research you do late. But throughout the writing of the book, then I knew I could go to this bank of photos and videos to, sort of like my bulletin board, to recreate that place and be there and think, because I knew I would have to have, 50 different ways of describing the same thing. So you need contact with it.
It's good.
But I loved what you said earlier today about how a lot of times you need to write the scene first and then go watch the cesarean so you know whether you wrote it right or not. And you can fix a few details, but you don't have to make the whole thing about the cesarean.
Right. I think that facts should largely be forgotten. It's like you have to know it, ingest it, forget it, and then write it. Or you have to use it to correct yourself. I'm worried about you guys a little. I don't want to keep you here until 4 in the morning. Do we have a time? I am good.
One more question.
Right in the front here? Yes?
Is that me?
Yes.
What you said, Anne, about being glad that you have Lucy in your book forever, makes me think of the question I immediately thought of when I saw that you two were going to be here tonight about the topic of literary friendships. And the first thing that occurred to me when I heard those two words together, literary friendships, was of all the collections of letters that I've read of writers and their friends and letters. And my mother was an archivist, and I'm a true believer in letter writing. And when I retired, my friends here said, "What are you going to do when you retire?" And I said, "I'm going to be the last customer of the United States Postal Service."
I'll see you in line.
Losing something when we no longer write letters to each other. So you have already mentioned tonight, both of you, that some of your friends still take a pen to paper and write the two of you letters.
You know, the most profound correspondence, and I have had some profound correspondence in my life, is the relationship that I have with Donna Tartt, who is my nearest, dearest, most beloved. And we write each other, we email each other every day. Letters, long letters. Donna probably wouldn't even like me saying this, but she's a very private person. And when we began this 12 years ago, she said, the deal is you may not keep any of this. None of this can be saved. And none of it is saved. And I've said to her sometimes, this stuff is good, man. You know, this is really, we have gone some very, very deep, true, important places over the years. And she said, this is for us, alone, us. And I respect that. And I don't save any of it. I think that in those years, I maybe printed out 3 emails that were just things that I had to keep for myself. And I have to say, there's something really beautiful about that. It is completely free of self-consciousness. These are not little email messages. We are not using a shorthand to dialogue back and forth. These are our very, very best selves and our very best words, our very best sentences and thoughts. And they will not come to anything except that they will improve us as people and as friends and in our love for each other. There you go, you know, gone. Now, also with Lucy and I wrote letters because we were always living in different places and we were really poor and we didn't have the money to make phone calls, so we wrote really long letters. I am not a saver, I throw everything away. And early on, I was like 25 and I had moved home with my mother and Lucy was in Scotland having surgery and I was sitting in my mother's bathroom one night reading her one of Lucy's letters. My mother's in the tub, I'm sitting there reading Lucy's letter, and my mother said to me, you need to save these because one day you're both going to be really famous and you're going to want to have those letters. So I saved, because of that, all of Lucy's letters. And I was really grateful to have those letters. One more thing on this letter question. Now that you know when I was young I dated David Foster Wallace. Again, no email, no money. I have a ton of letters from him. What do I do with those? What do I do with those? Do I turn those over to the David Foster Wallace archives? Because
that depends on what's in them.
And you know, that's the thing, because here's a guy who had 7,000 girlfriends over the course of his life, of which I was one, and I have these letters. Now, they're love letters, but I'm not an important figure in the story. But if these letters went in to the archives...
Someday someone will do their master's thesis on the relationship between the right?
So I burn them? You would burn them.
Well,
you know, but that is a nice round... No, sir, you would not burn them, sir. But that's a very nice round answer. So here you've got the letters of Ann Patchett and Donna Tartt, which are gone. The letters of Ann Patchett and Lucy Greeley, or frankly, just the letters of Lucy Greeley to Ann Patchett, which I have and were very important and valuable and helpful. The letters from David Foster Wallace, which I don't know what to do with. It's a real question. You know, they say that Eliot died by the fireplace shoveling, you know, and sometimes I think that's where I'll go.
That's where I'll go. Well, that's a really good question. I love that question, and I hear what you're saying about, or asking about whether something is being lost now that very few people actually write letters to each other. And I think the answer is yes, there is some loss there. not completely, because as you've just heard, a lot of us have correspondences by email in which we're actually writing letters. My joke is that my emails are really letters and my texts are really emails. You know, I'm always sort of one step more verbose perhaps than the form requires, but and I still use punctuation in my texts, but I can't help it. But yes, I think that the beautiful correspondences of old are fading away. I don't think that's going to be sort of a form for much longer. But I also I think there are other things taking its place, and people do save emails, as you've also just heard. But I guess I want to wind up by saying how important, how much I appreciate that choice that Anne just discussed, and honoring that choice to keep things private, because literary friendships ultimately are friendships, just like yours. And literary families are just families like yours. Ultimately, what's important to me is to honor the friendship, not to think about like what will people think of us down the line, or what evidence will they have that we were friends, but how can I be in this moment the best friend that I can be? Something that I think almost all writers get really tired of hearing is, oh, don't put that in a book, or oh, you'll put that in a book someday, as if everything that happens to us is just going to go straight into the into the next book. It's not like that. It's not, these books are not garbage pails. We don't just go around, collecting stuff. I almost never use incident from my own life in my work. And if I do, I have to ponder, I have to think about it for a long time to understand what it means. And then if it has the right meaning, I'll use it somewhere. But by then it's so changed that you would never recognize that was, the thing that you and I did, out in the sheep field or whatever. So, I mean, ooh, that, I didn't like that. Wow. Okay, full disclosure, I have sheep. I do things in the sheep field that this is just getting worse and worse. Stricken from the record. What I'm trying to say is that the privacy is sacrosanct. Privacy is and privilege are crucial parts of any friendships. And I kind of wrote a novel about that. The Lacuna was about a writer whose assistant saved all of his journals, even though he told her to burn them. I don't know which side of that I'm on. But ultimately, a friendship is a friendship. And to hang the future, it has to be in the moment the best. It deserves the best you can give it.
Something that Donna and I were talking about just this week, she just read my book of essays. And she said it was so striking because I'm reading these stories of things that have happened to you, and I remember when they were happening. And she said, I'm just reading them in this way of being so close to them. And she said it was almost like going to see an exhibit of Cindy Sherman photographs if you're Cindy Sherman's sister. So you're constantly seeing her in the photographs. And I realized for the first time, because we had this profound correspondence, for example, I wrote a piece about a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, who is a nun. And the day that I helped her move, and the movers, it was me and 3 nuns in their 70s, and the movers thought that I was a nun, and they were calling me Sister Anne, and all these very funny things. And the kid who had shamrocks tattooed on his knuckles was the mover. And I went home and I wrote that to Donna, because I write her every day, and I'm telling her the details, and then these are the details that wound up in the essay. But of course, without realizing it, I go home, I have the experience, I go home, I write to Donna. And by writing it, it's the first shaping of life into story. And that a lot of those sentences and ideas wind up without my even realizing it later on in essays. So there are all sorts of ways in which these things do compost down and stick around. And just because you're not actually getting the volume of letters doesn't mean you're not getting it.
That's true. And the archivists and the future historians will have it in one form or another because writers write.
Right.
And in some ways you could perhaps think that those long letters that they wrote to each other back, in the day were distractions from the writing that they could have been doing.
Or that was the time they spent with their email or texting.
Right.
And I don't think that they were sitting around thinking, well, someday I'm just going to move to it as great collected letters.
Right. No, and they'd probably be hideously embarrassed.
They probably would be. Whose letters just came out? Was it Willa Cather? It was, and they were saying how, she would shoot herself. It would just be so terrible because all she wanted was privacy and anonymity, and she begged her friends to burn her letters, and no one did. Because she didn't have a good friend like me. You're a lovely, patient group of people to listen to us.
You are. This has been a great deal of fun.
Thank you.
Okay, listen up, everybody, please. Just a second. Let the ladies, Barbara, you need to go to the bathroom before we get in the The bathrooms are down the hall.